So, if you would all help me welcome to the podium and to the dais Mr. Tim Culp, President of the Deer Park Chamber of Commerce, who will be introducing our next group of panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. If you would welcome our panelists, Congressman Gene Green, Congressman Randy Weber, and Congressman Brian Babin. Ladies and gentlemen, your congressman.
They're trying to figure out where they're going to sit right now, so that'll be interesting.
I was just surprised that I was on the right side of my Republican.
I'll leave that alone.
And so it begins.
First time I've ever been to the left. I just want to let y'all know.
Well, let me get some civility back to this situation very quickly. Again, we want to welcome everyone this morning and to our congressional panel, but we do want to remind everyone to please make sure that you fill out the cards at the table if you have questions. As we go through some questions that we have prepared for our congressman today, if you've got a question you would like to ask, fill that card out, hold it up, and some individuals from around the room will pick those up. But as was mentioned before, my name is Tim Culp. I'm the President and CEO of the Deer Park Chamber of Commerce. And our mission is to enhance the economic vitality for our members and the quality of life in Deer Park. So as a part of that mission, we partner with the Economic Alliance Houston Port Region, who is the regional leader in economic development, representing the world's most influential energy corridor and trade port. The Alliance's mission is to grow and market a vibrant regional economy through economic development, public policy, workforce development, and quality of life initiatives. It's absolutely second to none. It is our privilege at the Deer Park Chamber of Commerce to work so closely with this prestigious organization. As part of meeting their mission, the Economic Alliance is a strong advocate on the federal level, representing vital issues to the Houston Port region. Every year, the Economic Alliance takes a group to Washington, D.C. to address concerns from their federal white paper issues. These issues are surface and water infrastructure investment, storm surge protection, workforce investment, industrial regulatory issues, and NAFTA modernization. I would encourage those that would like to attend or possibly be interested in going on the trip to Washington to get with Chad and his staff and visit with them about the details. I promise you it would be a trip very well worth taking. But today, instead of having to travel all the way to Washington, D.C., we have Washington in the house, if you will. So we're so glad to have our congressman here with us. And so let's go ahead and begin with some simple introductions of each one. Congressman Gene Green has been representing the 29th Congressional District since 1992. In 1996, Congressman Green was appointed to the powerful U.S. House Energy and Commerce Committee, which he continues to serve on today. For the 115th Congress, he is the ranking member for the Subcommittee on Health and also serves on the subcommittees on Energy, Environment, along with Digital Commerce and Consumer Protection. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Gene Green. Seated next to Congressman Green, we have Congressman Randy Weber. Congressman Weber has been representing the 14th Congressional District since 2013. He currently serves on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee and serves as chair of the Energy Subcommittee. He is also a newly appointed member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, where he serves on the following subcommittees: of Water Resource and Environment, Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation, as well as railroads, pipelines, and hazardous materials. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Randy Weber. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have with us Congressman Dr. Brian Babin. He has been representing the 36th Congressional District since 2015. He currently serves on the House Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure, along with the Committee of Science, Space, and Technology. Dr. Babin serves as the chairman of the House Subcommittee on Space and also serves on the Subcommittee on Environment. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Dr. Brian Babin. Again, want to encourage you to make sure that you fill out those question cards. And again, as we go along, if we have time at the end, we're going to ask some of those questions as well. But let's get started. Gentlemen, thank you again for joining us. Glad to have you with us. We're going to start off basically looking at a question about harbor maintenance and trust fund, looking at harbor maintenance. And Congressman Weber, I'm going to kind of lean on you on this one a little bit. As you know, the Houston Ship Channel is the busiest waterway in the nation, which facilitates billions of dollars worth of economic benefit to the nation. It is essential to not only the economic health of our region, but also to the energy security of the country that the channel be both efficient and safe. The Corps of Engineers is studying potential improvements to the waterway to accommodate the growth in cargo and the increasing size of ocean vessels. Since channel improvements would ultimately have to be approved by and receive funding from Congress, what should we as a port community be doing in Washington to ensure that two-way traffic along the Houston Ship Channel can be maintained into the future?
Well, thank you for the question, Tim. This is huge. My District 14 has 5 ports more than any other member of Congress. Some have 4, but we have 5, and that does not include the Port of Houston. A lot of energy, and a lot of trade. We're the 13th largest exporting district out of 435 members in the House. And so it's huge for us. I think for y'all to come up to Washington, D.C. and to educate all of our members, talk to appropriators, talk to all of the committee chairs, talk to the leadership, which is what we do. And Dr. Babin will echo this day in and day out while we're there singing the praises of our petrochemical industry here in the ports and all that it represents. I served 4 years on the Texas House before I got demoted to Congress. And one of the things we were able to do was stop the diversions from the Fund 6 for highways in the Texas legislature. We need to make sure that the HMTF is used, here's a novel thought, for harbor maintenance. Yeah. And so this is a story that we tell every day that we can while we're in session. We're telling all the people. In fact, I got to ride with President Trump. He came down after the Santa Fe shooting, which happened in my district, and got ready to go to another event. He said, "Randy, are you going to that next event?" And I said, "I am, Mr. President." He said, "Would you like to ride with me?" And I said, "Let me see how much time I have to make this decision." So I was telling him about exactly how important our area is, and how important harbors and maintenance and the ports themselves from trade and just economic viability is. He seemed to understand. We need to convince the rest of our colleagues that this is vitally important and that it needs to be funded, because for us it means American energy security. That's how important it is.
Congressman Green, you'd like to follow up on that?
The Port of Houston is so important to not just East Harris County and our area, but for the whole country. Brian actually has part of it. I have the upper part of it. And Randy actually has the part that's in the Galveston Bay. And,
we're working on getting a toll booth for y'all there, by the way.
Over the years that I've been in Congress, we've got, first you have to get an authorization for deepening and widening. In the 90s, 95, we got authorization to go to 45 foot. And we're there legally, although with Harvey, we silted up so much, and I've been told there's still some areas that we don't have to the 45 foot now. But I know the port's working on going to 50 foot. And the way you do that is you get the Corps of Engineers, who sometimes is very slow, to do a report that say, yes, 50 foot. Go up to 50 foot at the Beltway Bridge, 45 foot further up along the channel in our district. Our district is Beltway Bridge up. And so we need authorization, and then we go back. The good news, though, is that we passed the appropriations bill last week that put more money into harbor maintenance and also in New Start money. And we need to make sure we get our share of that, because ours is such a huge value to the whole country. And but we got it. Now, what Randy said about the harbor maintenance is so true. About 5 years ago, Transportation Committee that my colleagues are on wanted to make sure that that harbor maintenance money was not diverted anywhere else. And they did a good job. But what we're seeing, it's still using it as an offset from the appropriators. We need those folks to, we're already paying those taxes, and our shippers have to do it. We want to get them to put that money where we can get their ships in here and is the most efficient way and the cheapest way we can. So next Congress has got that battle. We've been doing this for so many years, but we got a better appropriations this year than I expected, but it's still not going to be enough. And Transportation Committee needs to work on reauthorization to make sure we have up to 50 foot in the areas we can get there.
Congressman Babbitt?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Tim. Great to be here this morning. Great crowd, and couldn't be a more important, significant topic and issue than our economic development of our ports in this region. The good news on the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund is that nearly 100%, unlike in years past, nearly 100% of these funds are now going into harbor maintenance. And that has happened because of the great interest and a lot of really hard work on the part of our maritime industry and the congressmen that represent them. And that's all three of us sitting up here, plus some other folks. So it used to be less than half of the money that was taxed and gone into the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund was being used for what its specific purpose was, and that's maintaining, dredging, and taking care of our harbors. So again, I'd also like to repeat what was said, I think, by Randy and maybe Gene as well. But I think the importance of this region cannot be overemphasized. There's no way that we can overemphasize the significance of the industry. Randy's got 5 ports. I have 4 ports, including the Port of Houston here, which Gene and I share. And it is truly the engine that drives Houston's economy, the Texas economy. But more important, we have to communicate with our counterparts, with our colleagues in the House and the Senate, that this is such an important, you could see what happened to the price of gasoline and how quickly it spiked after a couple of 3 days of Hurricane Harvey last year. And so if we can communicate that, I think we can wind up getting a lot more out of Congress to help us, because it truly is the engine that drives a lot of the economy in the United States. Thank you, Tim.
Well, speaking of Hurricane Harvey, let's go on into our next question. With the recent hurricanes and tropical storms along the East Coast, and of course what we've seen in the Texas Gulf Coast this past week, we are quickly reminded of the enormous damage that can be caused. Looking back to just over a year ago when Hurricane Harvey struck this region, the statement that has been made by some in this group, not if, but when that's going to happen, it was answered. It's no secret when Hurricane Ike made landfall along our coastline, there was over $30 billion in damages to the region, most of which was a direct cause of storm surge and flooding. The state of Texas has invested major state funding, conducted extensive academic research, and has developed a consensus plan to protect our region. Knowing that each of you are concerned and dedicated to protecting this economic engine, can you provide us an update on the Coastal Spine Project and how that fits into the overall resiliency projects protecting the Houston Port region? And Congressman Green, I'm going to start with you on that question.
Well, I think all of us support the spine and the Ike dike. Randy actually has the whole dike in his district from the Louisiana border all the way down to Freeport. But we need to make sure that we get that done, because the next storm, if Ike would have gone in 50 miles to the south, we would have seen such a storm surge. Instead of wiping out Bolivar, we would have seen it all up. Well, we already had a storm surge in Baytown when I had it then with Ike. But that wall of water would go up into the ship channel, and no telling what damage it would do to that huge industrial infrastructure there. So that's why it's so important to not only have the berm, but also the most expensive part is to be able to close and open the Bolivar roads. But we all supported it, but it'll come out of Transportation Committee to be able to get that authorization. And then we go and every year beg appropriations for money.
Congressman Weber?
Well, Gene's exactly right. It's so important. I've been working with Senator Cornyn on a couple of bills. We passed out the COAST Act, COAST, Corps' obligation to assist safeguarding Texas in 2016, which said to them, make this a priority. The studies that the Corps was doing, to get them done as quickly as possible, use existing studies. On May 21st, in this session, I introduced the Coastal Texas Protection Act. Senator Cornyn has the other half of that. It's to expedite the completion of the Coastal Texas study that many of y'all are probably familiar with, to come up with a good plan. It is going to be a money situation where we have to get that money appropriated. But again, it's so important to our area. I was the Republican nominee for the Texas State Rep for top half of Missouri County in 2008 when Ike came ashore, and I remember that. And I was relaying that to John Shimkus, who was then chairman of a committee, energy subcommittee up in Ohio. And I said, didn't it go up? When I got to Congress, I was talking to Congressman Shimkus. I said, he remembered Ike. And I said, didn't y'all's gas go up 20 or 30% a gallon when Ike came ashore? And he goes, no, more like 60 cents a gallon. That's how important it is, all the way up in Ohio. So it's extremely important. We need to get it done. I went with the Texas Transportation Infrastructure Committee March a year ago over to the Netherlands. Most of you all know the Netherlands is 60% under sea level of their land, and they hold the ocean back, and we can too. And we looked at the gates they have there, and it's an incredible engineering feat, and there's no reason why we can't. So it's the number one priority, very high on our list, obviously. We want to make sure that we protect the Gulf Coast because it's not just the industry, but it's also families and people, primarily jobs, and of course it is homes and buildings and offices and industry. And it's the environment, because if you had a major disruption choose a chemical, a tank rupture, think of what that would do to Galveston Bay. So we're working hard, doing everything we can. Now, I don't lose sight of the fact that there are many, many political entities involved here. You have city councils, you have county commissioner courts, you have drainage districts, you have ports. So there's a lot of work and consensus to be developed. And the GLO he's mentioning. So a lot of work to be done, but we are honed in on that, Tim, and focused right on that, trying to get that done.
That's great. Congressman Babb?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Tim. On projects like the coastal spine, we know what we need. We know how to build it. We're still doing some studies on this. But I will say that federal dollars, the bad news is that federal dollars are in short supply, then demand is very high. And as we've already heard on a lot of these projects, Sabine Neches, the Port of Houston channel, many Cedar Bayou, many things that are authorized. Trying to get the funding on it is a different story, and that's where we spend most of our time. And I know Randy and I were over in the Director of Office of Management and Budget, Mick Mulvaney's office, just a couple 3 months ago. And we had our hands out, and we're trying to get him to appropriate what we've already had authorized. But when it comes to the coastal spine, I want to say the good news is that in the WRDA bill, which we just passed out of the House
Last Thursday.
That's right, last week. The good news is that there is a provision that we had put in there that absolutely kind of pinpoints the Texas Gulf Coast as needing the studies and the funding. And I'll even read it to you. It's Section 1228, Coastal Texas Study in the WRDA bill. And it says the Secretary shall expedite the completion of studies for flood damage reduction, hurricane, storm damage reduction, and ecosystem restoration in the coastal areas of Texas that are identified in the interim report due to be published in 2018 that describes the tentatively selected plan developed in accordance with Section 4091 of the Water Resources Development Act of 2007. So it specifies that we are to be looking at the Texas Gulf Coast. And again, I just want to say it's important for us to communicate the significance of this region in the country because of I've got all of us have chemical industries and refineries, but I have more chemical plants in my district than any other district in the entire country. And so this region is so important for the chemistry, chemicals, plastics, fuels, lubricants, etc. And many of these are strategic fuels that are so important. So. And with that, we want to protect the coastal spine is for protection of our industries. But folks, let's don't leave out the people. The people are the workforce. We've got to protect the folks in this region from a major storm hit because without people, the entire industry comes to a grinding halt. And so it's very, very important that we get this thing and protect folks and workforce and the industry as well.
Thank you. That's some really good information, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Let's talk about something that's definitely been in the news here a little bit. Let's talk about NAFTA and trade. With thousands of jobs relying on NAFTA agreement and the United States and Mexico seemingly being in agreement at this point, it appears that completing the negotiations with Canada is all that remains in securing a NAFTA deal. My question is, how do you see this agreement benefiting the Houston Port region? And Dr. Babin, I'm going to start with you on that one.
Oh, yeah, ready to do it. Working with President Trump is just kind of there's no other president that I've ever read in history that really operates like Donald J. Trump.
Amen.
He will, as far as a negotiator, I've never seen anything quite like it, because he will ask for the moon and will accept a satellite in low Earth orbit. But he really drives a hard bargain. And I can remember when he was talking about abolishing NAFTA, and I don't really think that the president really ever had any inclination to abolish NAFTA, but he has managed to rework NAFTA, and by gosh, it needed to be reworked. It's 14 years old. I'll give you an example. When NAFTA was signed back in '94, we had a trade surplus with Mexico of $1.6 billion. After 14 years of NAFTA, we have a trade imbalance with Mexico of $70 billion. And so I think the president's correct in trying to put some rebalance to this act, and I'm hoping that Canada will join with Mexico and the United States so that we can rework this to everyone's satisfaction, but a lot more fair to the American worker and to the American business folks and industry. But I also want to bring something else out, because here in our district, we do a lot of business with Mexico, and I know we've got an agreement to redo NAFTA right now with Mexico that we're working on. But I would urge the administration to be very cautious about this, because I want to bring something out here publicly. We have a company called Loadmaster, and 100 other companies that are subs and contractors that have been working with Pemex to produce two offshore drilling rigs for $229 million, a quarter of a billion dollar deal, a contract. And the rigs were 80% complete, and all of a sudden, Pemex, which is owned by the government of Mexico, decides they want to halt this deal and postpone it, and did not want to come up with the required funding for it. As times rocked on, Pemex basically left Loadmaster and about 1,200 to 1,400 of my constituents out of a job, looking for jobs, because they reneged on the deal. And so we have been in communication with the administration that if we're going to do a deal with NAFTA, let's make sure that the nation of Mexico and their nationally government-owned oil industry, Pemex, will live up to the agreements that they sign. And we are waiting to hear back from the administration to see where they are on this. But for those of you who are not aware of this, that was $250 million deal that we basically, our industries right here in Houston, were left holding the bag. And so I think this has got to be part of a NAFTA deal, and I think this is exactly what the president's been talking about in terms of fairness for the American industry and American workers. So I think that this is really good news for the United States and for our region especially. I'm looking forward to it.
Congressman Green?
Well, I'm happy that NAFTA is being renegotiated. Some of you may remember I didn't vote for NAFTA in 1993. The experience I had, it was the first time I went into the Oval Office, and I felt like I was going to the principal's office. And with President Clinton and Secretary Benson, who was a mentor to me for most of my career as a state legislator. And when I explained to him I couldn't vote for NAFTA unless we put these things in, and they said, we've already negotiated, we just need your vote. And I said, Well, I can't do it. So I walked out, and my chief of staff then, I said, I'm glad we don't have the draft. I think we would both be drafted when you tell the president no. No telling what you do when you tell President Trump no, because that was Bill Clinton. We lost about 4 of our smaller plants in our district who moved to Mexico for the lower wages in the mid-90s. The problem, though, is that those plants, when we got normal trade relations with China, moved that production to China from Mexico. So I don't mind renegotiating NAFTA. What I'm hearing sounds good, but I'd like to see it. And although I probably won't be the one voting on it because I don't think they'll put it to Congress till next year. But work with Mexico, and I've been working with members of the Congressional in Mexico. They didn't like NAFTA because they thought NAFTA would bring up their standard of living much better than it has. And it's a lot of it, and that's why part of the new treaty or agreement is auto plants that's going to have to pay more than $5 a day compete with our auto plants in San Antonio or Arlington. But I'm also concerned. We've always had a relationship with Mexico, NAFTA or no NAFTA. Shell Oil has provided, takes oil from Mexico, refines it, sends it back. Mexico only has refining capacity of about 60% of what they need. So they come and we provide it. And I like those jobs that are here in Deer Park, and although they live in my district too, but we need to watch it. The new president coming in Mexico says he likes the deal that they've worked on with the previous president, but we'll wait and see what's actually in the language of it. So.
Congressman Weber?
Well, it's so important. Texas is the leading exporting state in the country 15 years in a row, and I mentioned how important trade was. And Texas's number one trading partner is Mexico, to the tune of $97 billion, and then Canada is to the tune of $22.8 billion. So we're hoping Canada comes online. When I rode with President Trump in his limousine that day, he was in town. It was kind of interesting because I'm born and raised in a 20-mile radius here on the Gulf Coast. I've never been on the Gulf Freeway or I-45 when there wasn't another car in sight, you know. I thought, man, this is the way to drive right here.
I'm glad I wasn't in that.
Yeah. But I asked the president about that trade, how important it was that, and the possibility of a trade war. And he literally said, Randy, we've already had a trade war. We lost it. Now it's time to renegotiate and get back on the battlefield. And I think what Brian said has merit. The president goes out there and he pushes as hard as he can, and he scares the be-jabbers out of everybody. Y'all can write that down. Be-jabbers is an East Texas word. And then I think he comes back and he decides, okay, he scares them so bad, and he says, you want to renegotiate? You want to come to the table? What are you willing to give up? How many of y'all saw that yesterday Canada put a 10% tariff on LNG? So there is a form of trade, reciprocal war, I guess, going back and forth, which is big in our district because 95% of the nation's LNG is exported out of my district. NAFTA needed to be renegotiated, as Dr. Babin said, I'm sure, and to do it more thoughtfully, to do it better. Yes, we want Mexico to be accountable, the Pemex, the government-owned oil company. Yes, we don't want to try to compete with people who pay their workers $5 a day. And so it needs to be a fair, level trading ground. I get that. I'm a free trader, but I'm also a fair trader. We want to make sure. So I have to believe at the end of the day, the president is in the process of negotiating the best deal he can get. And I have confidence in that. We'll see.
Good deal. Let's talk about something that's important to so many in this room, and I know from a Chamber of Commerce perspective and from an Economic Alliance perspective, the creation of jobs. And the continued capital investment into the chemical industry in our region has created approximately 3,600 new jobs and is now facing a gap of approximately 9,000 direct or industrial contracting jobs in the next 4 years. These are skilled jobs which require an associate's degree or certificate, but not necessarily a bachelor's degree. A few weeks ago, Congress passed the Carl Perkins CTE Act for workforce training. How do you think this will advance CTE and STEM education for our school districts and community colleges? And Congressman Green, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I think, and I'm not just saying it because I'm here with San Jacinto College, But San Jacinto College has gotten that issue for many years. In fact, driving over, I saw across the road a new petrochemical, so you could get those associate degrees and maybe ultimately go on to UT, A&M, or University of Houston if you want that. But a lot of our other community college has not gotten there yet, where they can partner with the industry. San Jacinto College, for at least as long as I can remember, has talked to the industry that are in the district and say, okay, we want to help train. And I had the Secretary of Labor a few years ago at the college, and he met a young man who had 5 certifications. He was going to be able to walk onto a job at any of our Lyndale, Shells, you name it, and he had associate's degrees, just certifications. So I think San Jacinto College gets it. We need to have our other community colleges realize that if you want to have job training or workforce training, you have to talk to the people who employ those folks. Absolutely. And not just say you have this associate degree that may not be worth anything, but San Jacinto College has an associate degree that's worth that. And I've been a partner with them for so many years, and they just do such a great job. I wish I could clone it. In fact, one time they called and said, quit telling people our secret.
Congressman Weber?
Well, thank you. That was Glenn Thompson out of Pennsylvania's act, and it's so very important. Of course, some of you know I had an air conditioning company for 35 years, and so a skilled workforce is very, very important. We learned that in the Texas legislature when I was on the Pub Ed committee. Not everybody goes to a 4-year college, so there's got to be some goals and some plans aimed at that. What the reauthorization of the Perkins Act did, it's actually called Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act is the name of the act, but it was a reauth of the Perkins Act. And here's what it did. It gives money to states using the idea of local governance who have the flexibility to decide what they want to do with it. And they give money to their districts for school districts for career and technical education classes and programs. There was $1.3 billion appropriated in this bill. The bill goes on to empower state and local community leaders by simplifying the application process for receiving federal funds, makes that process easier. It provides more flexibility in using those federal funds. Who should know better than San Jack or an Alvin Junior College where I met my bride 44 years ago. And it gives them the ability to change, to respond to changing education or economic needs. It improves alignment with in-demand jobs by supporting that innovative learning that Gene was kind of alluding to. It helps them to build better community partnerships, to put this out in community, whether it's high schools, junior colleges, and to also engage with employers, as Gene pointed out. You want to know, what do employers expect? Third thing the bill does is it increases transparency and accountability by streamlining performance measures. How can you streamline this process so that it's not cumbersome, the red tape? It wants to ensure that CTE, career technology education programs, deliver results. You want to be able to measure those results, be able to make sure we're on the right track. And I could go on, but it actually ensures a more limited federal role, which I like, by reining in the Secretary of Education's authority and limiting federal intervention and preventing political favoritism. Local control, let them do it.
Sounds good. In the essence of time, I'm going to skip over Congressman Babin because I'm going to come straight to you with this next question, if I may. And the question is, according to the American Chemistry Council, America's aging infrastructure, including water systems, roads, bridges, and dams, are in desperate need of repair. Many of the specifications, procurement practices, and material preferences for infrastructure projects are equally outdated. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that more than $4 trillion of infrastructure investment is needed over the next 8 years. President Trump has made infrastructure improvement a priority. How can we know that our 21st century infrastructure will be built upon policies that allow engineers to select the best material for the jobs and make the best use of taxpayer dollars?
Thank you, Tom. Tim, the short answer to that is we need to pass my bill, which is H.R. 5310.
Something told me you might say that.
That's right. Municipal Infrastructure Savings and Transparency Act, or MISTA, we call it. And what that's going to do is to modernize these building materials, these codes that we've been dealing with for decades after decade after decade, need to be opened up. We've got modern materials that have come on that are much cheaper, much lighter, much more durable, and this is something that has to be opened up. And I think that at the very least, I have seen on water infrastructure projects alone, the passage of this bill, I think, could save the American taxpayer hundreds of billions of dollars in the long run when it comes to these types of projects. And what it'll do, it'll open up the bidding and development process. We're calling it the Open Competition Act. It'll open this up for federally funded public works projects and allow them to incorporate innovative and cost-effective building material on their list. And it's a sharp but critical reform that will, on federally funded procurement and project development processes, it'll return the authority and responsibility to those who know it best, to the engineers, the architects, the experts in the industrial field of construction, and so on and so forth. It will allow FHA, the Army Corps of Engineers, the EPA, the USDA to use an open, competitive bidding process for working with suppliers for construction materials on all future infrastructure projects that receive federal dollars. And let me just say this is not a mandate for new codes. What this will do, we're not mandating certain materials. It will open up the process so that it will allow these experts in the field to choose the cheapest, the lightest, the most durable. That's the easiest to handle. These types of materials, it will allow them to make that choice. I'm not taking away anything from ductile iron pipe or concrete or anything like that. And you're probably thinking, he just told us he had more chemical plants in his district than anybody else in the country. But this is not mandating plastics. This is not mandating any kind of vinyls or any type of material at all. It just opens the process up so that nothing will be excluded. Everything will be included depending on the experts in the field. So we're hoping and looking forward to this bill moving forward, and certainly it would be a huge shot in the arm for all of us in this room for this area, but it's not mandating anything. It's just opening the process.
Well, with that, I'm looking and the clock has hit zero probably about 3 minutes ago, and so I don't get jerked off this stage. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up with that. If y'all would, join me in welcoming, again, saying thank you to these gentlemen for spending their time with us today.